So, welcome everybody. In this recording, I'm going to spend a few minutes discussing a small but important improvement that we've recently made to IBM Integration Bus as part of FixPack 7 that helps you more easily secure Integration Bus when using LDAP. When you turn on admin security for Integration Bus, the product attempts to authenticate all the users who connect to a runtime node from a remote system, and the way that you would typically have done that in the past is you would have told Integration Bus about a web user. In my example on the chart here we have IB web user Ben, and when that user logs in, we know about their password, we check that they are valid, and at that stage we map that user ID to a local role, a local system user called IIB user. And that user has particular privileges against Integration Bus. They're allowed to either deploy or change properties of the node, that kind of thing. And that's all well and good, but in many clients, particularly larger ones, you might well have an existing LDAP server implementation, which you might prefer to use to store your users and passwords instead. So shown on the right-hand side, that scales a lot better. You could have hundreds of possible users perhaps, and you might also want to put in place a company-wide security standard, like for example the length of time before a password expires, or which particular characters you might have to adhere to when setting a password. And it could be quite annoying to have to end up implementing that kind of thing in many disparate applications, and that's why Integration Bus has embraced the use of LDAP as one possible option. Okay, so I'm going to switch to my desktop here, and we will start by running some commands against IB. So just to begin with, I've run an MQSI list command there to show you that I have one integration node called testnode_LDAP, and the admin port for that node is 4416. So if I just bring up my web browser session here, you can see that currently I don't have any security turned on for that node at all. And so the first thing that we're going to do here with this experimental node is to turn on administration security. In order to do that, the first command that I'm going to execute here is to stop MQSI stop the testnode_LDAP. And when that comes down, you'll notice that real-time updates disabled message on the right-hand side of my web browser. And that enables me to then carry out the administration task of turning on security. Today I'm going to begin just by defining a local user to be secured against Integration Bus, but then later on we're going to also start using LDAP as another option, and that's the reason why you can see the LDAP Explorer tool in the base of my screen. But we're going to start simply and build things up. So to begin with, I'm issuing here the MQSI change auth mode command. That has a flag to set it to be active, -s, that's active. And the -m option is choosing file. We've got a couple of different options for authorization, and we can use file-based authorization or MQ-based. I've just done a start there on the node as well, and if I go across to my web browser, you'll see that I now have an authentication panel pop up and the opportunity to enter my user ID and password. Of course, at this stage, all I have done is to turn on security. I've not defined any users, so if I just type gibberish in here, user ID of BBBB, you'll see that I am not allowed in. So at the moment, nobody is allowed in, and in order to allow somebody access, we have to type another command. And so for that purpose, I will come back across to my command console session. I'll clear off the screen to give you the best possible visibility. And next we will issue a command that is called MQSI web user admin command. And the purpose of this web user admin command is to define a web user for Integration Bus purposes. In this case we're using -c to create the web user, and I'm going to call him IIB web user Ben because I'm not particularly inventive, and a password of password123. Nobody will ever guess that password. And the -r parameter there specifies a role of IIB user. He's my local user ID that has the authority to do things to Integration Bus. So when I log in with web user Ben, I will be mapped to the privileges of IIB user. And that's basically the way that Integration Bus security works. We can set up a number of different web users, and they can all map to a particular role, which is then given some accesses against the Integration Bus node. So for example, to deploy a bar file or to make some administration changes against that component. So having described the IB web user Ben parameter, what I will attempt to do next is to take that user ID and log into my web user interface here on the right hand side. So I'll type in IIB web user Ben, but just to prove that there's no smoke and mirrors here, I'll begin just by typing any old password, so I'll get that one denied when I click login, unsurprising. And now I'll type in the correct password. So if I go with IB web user Ben again, this time I'm going to type in password 123, and with a bit of luck and a following wind, we'll be able to log in there. Fantastic. So IB web user Ben has been allowed access. And once I'm into the integration bus web UI there, I can see the test node, I can see that it's all up and running. That's great. Now if I clear the screen, the next thing that I'm going to do here is to issue a change properties command. And this is, instead of relying on the locally defined integration bus web user, I'm now going to make a change to the web admin component of integration bus. And what that's going to do is enable the integration bus to talk to an LDAP server. So you'll see the parameter that I'm adding here is an LDAP authentication URI. And I'm going to give that a value that points to my local box actually. I'm going to use the LDAP protocol to talk to the LDAP server. And here I'm just typing in the host name of my local server. When you install LDAP, I'm actually using Open LDAP here. You will have a port that you enable, so that's 389 in my particular example. And within the LDAP root hierarchy, you need to have an entry point defined there, so I'm just going into ibmexample.com. You can see that's the same root that's classified in the LDAP Explorer tool that I'm showing in the bottom left there. The next command that I need to issue at this stage is to inform integration bus of the user ID and password to use when connecting to their LDAP server. That's done in integration bus using the setdbparms command, somewhat confusingly named for historical reasons. We use that command for all kinds of purposes for storing user IDs and passwords. So what I'm issuing here, the -n parameter specifies that this is going to be for LDAP purposes for my box, and I've got a user ID that's already been configured for LDAP, and his password is open LDAP, but with the 3 and the 4 replaced in there for the characters. Again, nobody will ever possibly guess that password. And having set up that access to LDAP, the last thing I need to do here is to define the user to use when we talk to LDAP. So what I'm actually doing here is still doing a mapping of privileges. And the user called btomps here is actually known to LDAP. You'll see it in the base of my screen. And when I log in, I'm going to pass that user ID of btomps. The X parameter tells IB to go across to LDAP to check out the password. And I'm going to do that and have it mapped to IB user if it's successful. In order for all of these changes to take effect, I need to restart my integration bus node. So I've just issued a stop and a start parameter at that stage. And now if I go across and type the user ID in of btomps, I start with a fake value there, again just to prove that it is actually doing something in checking the password. And now if I type in password 1, which is the value from LDAP, then yes, fantastic, you can see that I have managed to do this, and that's successfully delegated the password check across to the server. So that was relatively straightforward for one user, of course, but the world isn't really that simple a place. In practice, you could have many tens or hundreds of users defined within your LDAP server, and what you would not want to do within integration bus is have the quite laborious job of typing in the MQSI web user admin command for each one of those users and mapping them across individually to individual roles. So what I can do with the command, and this is the enhancement that's come most recently in Fixpack 7, I can run that web user admin command again, but this time use the asterisk symbol to wildcard out the user ID. And what that therefore means is that when I come to log in here, I'm just going to log out btomps so that I get my login profile back. This means that I can actually specify any user at all that's within LDAP. So I've got a selection here. Who should we go for today? I don't know. Let's try Trevor Dolby. Go down there and I can see he's got a user password of password 2. Again, I'll start with a deliberately incorrect password just to prove that it's not just checking the user ID here. So I'll just put in gobbledygook 4 characters and then go back and do Dolby again. And this time I'll use the right password, password 2. And without telling integration bus anything about Trevor, you can see that I've just delegated that check through with a wildcard, and fantastic, I am in. And so that concludes our demonstration today of the new enhancement to Fixpack 7 for using wildcards with LDAP. Thanks for listening.